get into types of currency. This is something that I really wanted to discuss since we're talking about the topic of abundance. And I wanted to really go over the multitude of currencies that we have as we walk through this planet. Feel free to add any forms of currency that may come to mind in the chat. I have here listed 6, but there are so many other than the ones that are listed. So, as with anything in life, these forms of currency can be leveraged or they can be squandered depending on the person and their circumstances. And in many cases, most of all, their mindset. So we're actually going to be going clockwise if you look at the diagram, and we're going to be going clockwise to go over the different types of currency, what they are, how you can leverage them, and how they play a role in your life and your ability to acquire the abundance that you are looking for. I have here the notion of time currency. So how many of you have heard the common saying that time is money? Put a 1 in the chat if you've heard this before, and put a 2 if this is new. Right, we've all heard that. That's a very cliche statement. And so time is a form of currency. We're all allotted a different amount of time on this earth. Some will be here longer than others, right? So for example, there are people who will be here for 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. And then there are also folks who will unfortunately be here for, let's say, 8 months, 8 minutes. Some people are not afforded the same amount of time on this planet. But it's an unfortunate reality that time is a finite resource. And time currency manifests in today's culture through our obsession with age, youth, health. That cultures tend to be very youth focused, right? And we see this oftentimes in how opportunities are awarded to those who tend to be young, right? And then as you get older, these opportunities tend to taper off with age. And this is when you begin to notice, as people age, they begin to ask questions like, am I too old for this? Am I too old for that, right? That becomes the limiting belief that people internalize, thinking that they are past their prime, past their time. That cultures tend to be very youth focused, right? And part of the reason why people with time become what is known as bitter, jaded, even broken, is as they get older, they become more disillusioned with life. You know, when we grow up, when we're younger, we grow up thinking that we can be anything that we want. I can be a doctor, a lawyer, astronaut, all in one, right? And then as you're older, you're given these harsh truths about reality, about what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot be. Now, they may not even be truths. They may just be narratives that were fed to you at a young age, and then you then internalize it. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. So people with poor time currency feel as if they have lost their race with time, and it begins to show. It begins to show in their mind, their body, their spirit, and how they walk through the world. Society's eyes, when we're young, you are considered almost like a millionaire in terms of time. And then as you get older, it's like you become a thousandaire. And then, you get a little older, it's like you have $100. And then when you're on your deathbed, you're down to your last dollar, right? You're down to your last dime, and then time's up. That's the perception, at least, when it comes to how societies function. And we're going to go a little bit further in this program about the notion of leveraging time, how to use time as a form of currency that doesn't have to be used against you. And we're going to be talking about some tools that you can utilize in order to make sure that time is on your side. So we have here relational currency as the next one, right? Can I get an idea in the chat? And I kind of give you an idea. What do you think relational currency means? I give you some clues in the diagram, but what do you all think? Just upon hearing that term, relational currency, what does that sound like to you? So Candace says the value we place on relationships, people in our lives. And if you all want to talk, feel free to unmute your mic. You all are open to do that. And also, if you feel more comfortable in the chat, that's fine as well too. So Candace says,
able to, sorry.
oh, sorry.
Being able to do.
I'm sorry.
Being able to quote unquote do. One is self. Two is relating to one other person. Being able to two. I'll write it in the chat, and it may make more sense.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Zany. And so we have that. And then we also have Candace who said the value we place in relationships in our lives. Relational currency has to do with your location, your environment, your community, right? Your networks. So these are all forms of community. Someone who lives in a robust, intimate, and large community has a stronger currency than someone who might live in a smaller community or a community that is not as tight-knit or intimate. So someone who is popular is more likely to thrive in certain areas of life than someone who is less popular. And we see this all the time. We see this in how people who have more access tend to get more opportunities than people who do not have access. And a lot of that is largely due to the relationships that they have. Now, of course, quality plays a role in your relationships, right? It's not just about having a million people that you know. It's about the level of intimacy and level of quality. But overall, when you have quality and quantity, you get the best of both worlds. And I think this is what most of us would like and envision for ourselves and for our future. How do you bring in quality? How do you bring in quantity? And merge the two so that you can bring forth a life that is in alignment with what you want. So we have here the next one, which is visual currency. Visual currency is beauty, clothing, images, symbols, right? Social and cultural imagery and iconography. These are things that on a subconscious level we operate from. We get preconceptions that we formulate at first glance when we see certain things. When you look at someone, it's more than just their appearance. You're judging them based off of body language, context cues, tone. There's so many different subconscious things that inform how you perceive a particular person. And so a common thread is, or a common question, I should say, is what archetype does one embody at first glance? We all have archetypes that we embody. We all have different things that we convey through our clothing, through our tone, through our overall image. And how you come across to people becomes a currency that you can leverage. And it also can be a currency that in some instances can go against you, right? And so we've all gone through experiences like this, particularly when it comes to stereotypes, when it comes to going out in the world and being perceived a certain way that might be contrary to how you actually are, and then feeling the need to prove yourself. So put a 3 in the chat if you relate or have gone through an experience similar to that, where what you embody doesn't necessarily match how people perceive you. Okay, so we have three. Yeah. So that's something that is it's a universal experience for most. So moving along, we have monetary currency. We all live in a capitalistic system, so we're very familiar with monetary forms of currency. Fiat versus crypto, right? Fiat currencies being the legal tender controlled by governments, cryptocurrencies being the digital assets that are used within blockchain technology. But also, aside from that distinction, right, there is monetary currency that exists as something that is both individual, communal, and generational. So if you're someone who has all three going for you, you're pretty much set for life. You have your own money, you come from a community that is self-sustained and has its own money. And then there's also generational money that you come from, where not only your ancestors came from money, but your descendants will be recipients of money. Those are the people that are virtually set for life, at least when it comes to monetary reality. Most of us, however, barely have one. We barely have one, okay? We barely have our individual currency together, let alone communal, let alone generational. And this is something that we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into today. And I do an even deeper dive into during my Fluid Money mindset program. So, speaking of mindset, the second to last form of currency we have here is mindset. And what does it mean to have mindset as a form of currency? You can give me an idea of what you all think in the chat. Mindset deals with self-concept, self-consciousness, self-belief, confidence, right? The first 7 years of your life determine your self-concept and your self-consciousness. This is why your formative years are so important, because they set the tone for how you believe and how you perceive yourself to be. So let's see. And lastly, we have the notion of spiritual currency. That's connection to the divine, inner work. That's a notion of karma, energy, aura, psychic gifts, and abilities. Spiritual currency is essentially the value, or represents the value of spiritual beliefs and practices, and how these practices help you sustain yourself in a physical realm that often does not carry much value, or does not see the value in spiritual gifts and in spiritual realms and realities. So these are just some of the 6 forms of currency that exist. There are a plethora of other ones that you all are free to come to your own understanding of or create for yourself. But these are largely the 6 forms of currency that I want for you all to get a grasp of as we go through this journey of formulating a life of abundance, particularly in 2025, where we have to get to a point where we use our gifts, we use our assets, we use, in many ways, our privileges, right? Because many of us have different privileges when it comes to these 6 archetypes of currency. Some of us have more time currency than others. Some of us have more relational currency. Some of us have more visual currency than others, right? So there's so many different ways in which your abundance can be something that manifests into the new year and beyond. So be mindful of that throughout your journey and just throughout the year 2025. How are you going to be leveraging the various archetypes of currency that you have? So I want us to do a little activity where you do a self audit on yourself. And you have to be very honest. That's the thing. And you have to take 5 minutes to think of what are the forms of currency that you currently have. How can you leverage them as ways to gain wealth? How do they shape your perception of wealth? So let's start with the first one. What forms of currency do you currently have? So I'll bring up the diagram again, and you can look at all 6 of them. Now, most of us have every single one of them, but you have them all on different scales. So you can rank them 1 to 10 if you feel compelled to. Like for time currency, you could say, I think with 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, you could say, well, I think I have a lot of time on my hands, so I'll say my time currency is at an 8. My relational currency, I have a lot of friends. I'm pretty popular. Okay, I'd say I'm at a 9. So you can rank yourself based off of these archetypes of currency and really see where your strong suit is. And this will really help inform you on how you can create opportunities for yourself in the new year. So put a 8 in the chat to let me know that you're getting started, and bring out a pen, a paper, or some other device that you need, and just rank yourself for all 6 of the archetypes. And I'll give you all a few minutes to do that.